Hey neighbor, thanks for tuning in to another episode of 7 on Sunday. My name is John, and something you might not know about me, I majored in broadcast production technology in college. Community college, don't get too excited, but it was pretty cool because most of our classes were taught off campus at an actual media company. Growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, the radio still played a massive role in introducing me to music. Countless cassettes were filled as I held my finger over the record button, desperate to save the songs I love most to tape because my family was very late on getting a computer, and those cassettes that still exist are possessions that I wouldn't trade for anything. As I got older, I heard rumors from friends about banned songs considered too taboo for terrestrial radio, so long story short, I've wanted to talk about this topic for a very long time, and I can't wait to reveal these 7 songs that were in some way, shape, or form banned from the radio. Some of these are flat out ridiculous bans that were eventually reversed, while others are quite sinister in terms of why they were kept off the air. Prepare for an eye-opening roller coaster ride through the world of censored media, so sit back, hit that like button, and enjoy. I cry when angels deserve to die. Metal group System of a Down's Chop Suey was one of more than 150 songs pulled from the airwaves following the tragic events of 9/11. America was on edge, and rightfully so, but the media massively overreacted by putting a seemingly invisible dome over everything that might even remotely be considered a sensitive topic. 20 years ago, we didn't have the world at our fingertips. The conglomerates had all of the power, and it was scary when they decided to pull the plug on so many songs just like that. For System's newly released hit, it was definitely the lyrics that scared the programmers, especially those lines "self-righteous suicide," which was actually the original name of the song, but get this, it had already been banned once before by their very own label for not being a radio-friendly title. Chop Suey is of course no longer banned. You could turn on a rock station any time of day and yell along to 50% of the words while making noises with your lips to fill in the blanks the other half. In fact, it's their most popular song ever by a wide margin, something System's very own Darren Malakian partially credits to the band. Many of their fans heard these lyrics and equated the self-righteous suicide to be a prediction of the terrorist attacks, about the men who believed they were sacrificing themselves for the good of their country. It didn't stop there, as Darren said. We had songs on the album like called Jet Pilot, lyrics that were singing self-righteous suicide, aerials in the sky, so fans at the time thought that we had predicted what was gonna happen. Darren and the rest of System of course dismissed these claims, knowing that the songs were written well before 9/11, but it is pretty crazy that the album Chop Suey is lifted from released September 4th, 2001, exactly 1 week before those tragic events. Why in the world would such an innocuous piece of 80s history see a partial ban at radio stations worldwide? Well, it's the early 80s and a woman was dropping sexual innuendos before the reign of Madonna, and the higher-ups were not having it with the suggestive writing. "Let's get physical" is a phrase that stuck like glue. Just ask any fan of The Office or Dua Lipa. You know exactly what happens when you tell people that they can have something, they do it anyways, and they make that shit permanent, both on or offline. One spicy lyric really got under the early 80s conservative skin, so here it is. Make sure no one else can hear this debauchery. There's nothing left to talk about unless it's horizontally. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. The implications of that line, Wait, that's actually tamer than a tiger at Carol Baskin's Big Cat Rescue. To the surprise of no one, the Christian-backed stations, yes, there were plenty of them, It's America, were the loudest critics of Olivia Newton-John's classic hit, robbing us of an absolute bop while lamenting it as a carnal sin meant to turn our young girls into harlots and the men into wild animals because, yeah, that makes sense. You already know that move backfired as Physical revived the singer's career, spent 10 weeks at #1, and helped advance our culture towards accepting women that openly own their sexuality. The protesters eventually gave up and moved on to other meaningless boycotts that accomplish absolutely nothing because the power belongs to the people, and the people shouted loud and clear, "Neon spandex supremacy!"
Fuck the police and Red said it with authority. Because the niggas on the street is a majority of gang. That's what whoever I'm stepping.
One of the most championed protest songs of all time almost never reached the masses, and yes, the radio ban in pretty much every market except Australia was a huge part of that attempted censorship, but the hip-hop group themselves almost pulled the plug on Fuck the Police before it was fully written. TLDR, legendary producer Dr. Dre was working with N.W.A. in the late 90s for their iconic sophomore album Straight Outta Compton. He was on probation at the time that involved him checking into the sheriff's office every weekend, and he told Ice Cube that they couldn't do the song since it probably wouldn't be a good idea to have his name attached to a track called Fuck the Police when he was literally checking in with the cops every week. The sketchbook lyrics were of course rediscovered, and Ice Cube took the song to his fellow N.W.A. member Eazy-E, rest in peace. He actually did perform on the track too, as well as MC Ren, and that part is history. It's the next chapter that got tricky, since at the time, the radio could literally make or break you, and with fearmongers doubling down on the horrible effects of gangsta rap narrative, N.W.A. were their scapegoats, and they blacklisted the future hit. Pun, sadly, yes intended. F-bombs were certainly part of the hurdle they had to clear, and censored versions of the song do exist, but that was widely seen as an excuse to silence an entire set of lyrics that went way beyond just cursing or vulgarity. Despite receiving dead air from the radio, minus the legends over at Triple J in Australia, that single fueled their album Straight Outta Compton to massive heights and international fame. That iconic cover is still seen all the time on clothing modern day, and the LP itself is certified 3 times platinum. That's what happens when you try to silence people who actually have something to say. N.W.A.'s hit sadly only continues to live on with its relevancy, given the raging epidemic of racial profiling and straight up murders being committed by law enforcement, those who were supposed to protect and serve. They tried to control its spread, but even in the days before the internet, injustice spoke up louder than the corporations trying to censor a group of young black men. In the early years, Kesha was an easy target for other celebrities and talk shows because of her pseudo-trashy glitter bomb lifestyle. Sleazy fun just wasn't cutting it apparently, but they couldn't really do anything to halt that insane momentum she had going, with non-stop top 10 hits flooding the airwaves for years, and the lead single Die Young from her second full-length album seemingly well on its way to topping the Hot 100 yet again. However, on December 14th, 2012, less than 2 months after the single released, something horrible happened in the state of Connecticut. A lone gunman whose name I'm intentionally not saying killed a total of 28 people, with 27 of them being at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Calling it a senseless act of gun violence or a national tragedy doesn't even begin to describe what it was. It was this devastating event where even losing one child with a bright future would have been far too many. So I think you might see why the title of Kesha's song came under intense scrutiny. Die Young is the only band on this list that I actually somewhat understand, even though the song is super upbeat with buzzing synths and lyrics about living life to the fullest because tomorrow isn't promised. Radio stations feared that listeners, especially in the northeast quarter of America, would only hear those words Die Young, and they didn't want to be the ones that passed on this song to somebody who might be struggling and see it as a reminder of the shooting. Each station, of course, had the right to test the waters and play the song if they wanted to. It wasn't a nationwide pull, but I pretty vividly remember this song going from constant airplay to ghost town overnight, and I live all the way down in North Carolina, not even close to Connecticut. Die Young lost a lot of momentum right there, in a situation where very clearly a song's chart placement is not at all important, but I thought it was worth noting that yet another national tragedy led to a popular song getting pulled, this time for reasons I can completely understand, even though Kesha did absolutely nothing wrong.
Kiss lots of boys, but kiss lots of girls, if that's something you're into.
Country music is an unaccepting boys club? No, it couldn't be. Could it? Well, if you were to ask Kacey Musgraves, one of the genre's most controversial artists, despite having done little to nothing that's in any way controversial, she'd probably back me up on saying that it's not exactly the most progressive-minded genre. Follow Your Arrow was a big step forward for Kacey in terms of getting her name out there, and not just to the typical country crowds either. It's not just the twangy sounds that keep some listeners from diving further into this style, it's the bullshit backroads, drink a beer, hop up in my truck, baby girl lyrics, something that she's avoided playing into since her debut. I tried to clue you in, but in case the hint didn't take, there's a few lines on this one that got country radio absolutely fuming, because Kacey Musgraves done went out here and supported the gay agenda. That's right, the lyric "kiss lots of boys" or "kiss lots of girls," if that's something you're into, was quickly labeled as liberal propaganda and got Kacey pulled from the radio quicker than a Texas bullet at high noon. And to think that was the lyric that they decided to draw the line at, like nothing about the references to crack, premarital sex, or all these other things that are apparently hot-button issues among conservatives, apparently the gays take top priority. Or bottom. Same Trailer, Different Park is a damn classic, and the fact that she riled up this many people with a peppy little song that pointed out how you're gonna be judged no matter what you do, that's hilarious. The irony is not lost on me. Follow your own arrow, people, not the one that your backwards ass culture tells you to.
Happiness is a warm gun.
Rock and rollers of the classic kind are no stranger to radio censorship, but the Beatles collected quite a few over their decade together due to either misunderstood lyrics or contraband discussions that the sensitive overlords controlling the media couldn't handle. I went with Happiness is a Warm Gun from my favorite record of theirs, the White Album, because of its mysterious writing that was noticeably misinterpreted by the masses. It had become commonplace to look for hidden backmasking meanings in their catalog around this time, but with Warm Gun, the assumption was that the gun and the nods to shooting were metaphors to describe John Lennon's addiction to heroin, something he repeatedly denied. Lennon noted that the title of the song was lifted from a gun magazine that promoted that sort of lifestyle to young impressionable men, so it's no surprise that he found the radio band to be very funny. Like, you can promote guns and say that shooting them will bring happiness, but he can't write a song using those words as innuendos for sex? Yeah, that seems about right for 1968. Putting a song on the Do Not playlist because of drug-related content feels like it would have been a constant uphill battle during the age of the hippie. Not that this song was about heroin, at least not entirely, but I feel like a line or two definitely are, because I Need a Fix, I'm Going Down is pretty damning. But they weren't at all consistent with what got by the censors and what got the axe. That's the problem. This keenly written tune should have been a big hit for the Fab Four, but instead it went down as a deep cut. It's also noteworthy for being one of the final times all four members felt creatively satisfied putting a song together in the studio, with Paul and John listing Warm Gun as their favorite song on the self-titled album, even though it took 70 takes to get there. Whatever the true meaning may be, it doesn't change the fact that this flawlessly articulated so much of what the later years Beatles were always aiming for. Tempo changes, multiple styles of rock, twisting wordplay, it's all got a home here. So radio play or not, the song became legendary due to its sheer ability to prey upon the listener's curiosity.
Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze.
Throughout our history in America, if there's one thing that remains consistently true, it's that we've always had a problem with racism. The Civil War didn't just end it and everyone went on their merry way. It was an absolutely brutal time with little to no justice for African Americans that started there and lasted well past the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. Billie Holiday is a name I'm sure many of you have heard. A black lounge singer dually serving as a human rights activist might sound commonplace to you in the 2020s, but 1930s America was a very different place, at least in some ways. A poem titled Bitter Fruit was written by Abel Meeropol in 1937, paving the way for a musical interpretation which Billie recorded in 1939. It quickly gained underground popularity in no way due to the radio, but more because black families constantly found themselves mourning the loss of friends and families at the hands of senseless hate crimes, often in the form of lynchings, which were in fact the strange fruit in Miss Holiday's heartbreaking song. You may know this historical protest better by the 1965 cover version recorded by Nina Simone at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, or maybe by the Kanye West sample of the Nina Simone version from his throttling 2013 cut Blood on the Leaves that remains one of his top 5 songs easily, but I can guarantee that you do not know this song from the radio. Maybe some of my older viewers could confirm this for me, but Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday was considered to be the musical equivalent of radioactive waste. No station wanted to touch this or deal with the backlash white viewers would surely call in to complain about, so that's where her stints at the Jazz Lounge came into the picture. When I tell you this woman had something to prove with her voice, I'm not talking about making a name for herself or anything else you'd equate to success in our modern world. I'm talking about someone who sang for their life for their people, their family, regardless of the attacks and threats being used in a failed attempt to silence her. She never backed down, even performing the song on national television in England in 1959, just months before her untimely death. Talking about this song and the meaning behind it and the many different versions, it can make us want to cry or clap while sitting down and just thinking about what these activists sacrificed in the pursuit of racial justice, and I think that's great to recognize, but it's clear cut in this world that we're living in right now that we need to do more to be better and to speak out and stand against racism. I felt compelled while writing this video to make a donation to a charity that would support black communities, and I encourage you to do the same if you're able to. I donated to the N.W.A. Legal Defense and Education Fund, and I'll leave a link for that resource in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching this special episode of SOS. I told you to brace for a roller coaster ride, so I think we had that together. If you enjoyed the video, then please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe for the love of music, and I would love to know your thoughts. Does a song getting banned on the radio make it more popular in some way, or does it just straight up not matter? There's a couple episodes of SOS floating on screen here if you want to catch those, and other than that, peace.